We have a clean up, mount the engine in a jig, work on the starter motor and start on the top end. I've resurrected an old stand that I made a couple of years ago for the first engine. I actually had the first engine running on this mount. You're one of my first videos, you'll go back in the playlist and find that. The book says mount it back in the bike frame and it's the best place for it to be finished off, but I'd like to know that the motor's going to run before I try sling it in the frame, because if there is a problem getting it in and out of the frame is a bitch. That's the other side. These are bits of 32mm laminated bench top that I cut a bit of a profile into and then spaced the two pieces 200mm apart with some bits of scrap block, which seems to suit about what the bike was. The rear mount needs to be, you can see how easy I can slide that around. The rear mount is too wide for that, so a couple of nuts inside on a bit of threaded rod, 10mm threaded rod poked through there, holds the back up off the ground. Will be suitable for starting and running it later. That's the jig. I'm going to pause on this engine for a little while I clean up my mess. Chuck a cover over that engine so the dirt doesn't get down the cylinder, and I'll move back to, I've got parts for this spare engine, all the lesser parts spread all over the floor here. And the first thing I've decided to do, I want to actually assemble it pretty much complete. First thing I've done is I've heated these cases and dropped the bearings into it. Now these are the bearings out of the 94 engine, which I decided were pretty good in the end after they were cleaned out, but I didn't want to gamble on them. So both cases have got their inner crankcase bearings pushed back in. This one is missing a bearing there. It's on the counter, well, it's on the input shaft, and it's the input shaft I was having trouble with. It can stay there. I might just heat that case when I'm trying to slip it together, but rather than having crank shafts and all of these pieces of axles and stuff in a loose box, I thought the best way is to put it back together. The other thing I've done is I've taken the head studs out of both halves, and I've got them here. How I did that was I heated them a little bit. I heated the locations where they went in. If there's Loctite or something on them, which I suspect they probably were assembled with Loctite because they were tight as hell, but the heat on there, I used actually the MAP gas on there to get them hot and the steel hot, and yes, they then broke loose. They needed a double nut on the end of them to let me torque them. It's that bulbous end there that goes into the head. But yes, they were pretty bloody tight, but I got all four to come out no problem. The advantage of those being out is when this engine's finished, I think it'll fit in that red tub for storage. I think with all of these pieces loose, it wouldn't fit in that red tub, and certainly the head studs overhung the box. We'll see how that goes when it's together. I'm not going to be too fussy how I slam it together. Obviously gaskets and nothing like that are going in it. I'll try and get all the screws. All those things are just spare parts for future. Okay, I am putting this as all the old parts being reassembled in the spare motor crankcase. I think I've got everything in there. That's the damaged input shaft there. That bearing came out with that shaft, and so the case has got to go over it. I might try and heat it a little bit in that area. This rear cog, there's a lot of space in there, and it would be good to have a differential that fitted in that space, even if this gear had to be cut and machined to fit a differential in it somehow. But that's why I'm taking this picture, just so I've got a visual record of how that looks. One of the next jobs I'm going to do on this quad bike is to sort out the starter. This starter here came off the 94 engine, which was the one that had blown and bent the conrod, and this one was in the Chook shit, and I think is the starter motor off the spare motor. One indicator of that is there's all this corroded front casing here. That's on the lower side. You see the power terminals on the other side. So this is the side facing the motor, and there's quite a bit of material eroded away from this side, and there was a whole build up on the spare motor where that corrosion and erosions occurred. This one off the 94 is fine in that same area. So I actually think this 94 starter probably runs, would have probably been running when the motor blew up, and there's no reason for it to fail after that. But I'm going to pull both of them down and check things like the brushes in both of them. It may be that the crappy old one has better brushes than the new one, or vice versa, or bearings or anything else, armature. Anyway, I'll pull them both down side by side, and they appear to be the same units, even though they're maybe as much as 5 years apart or something. Okay, these are some of the parts of the 94 starter motor cleaned up. The brushes in this have still got a bit of life left in them. The armature, a bit of a wire brush, looks nice. No problems with that whole shaft. There's a roller bearing in the front nose in there, and an oil seal. So the oil from inside the crankcase gets up to lubricate that bearing and should be stopped by the oil seal there for coming through to the starter motor. This is just the outer magnets, 4 magnets around the outside there. That just buffed up reasonably neatly. Doesn't take much to get the screw heads looking good. So there's shims and spacers and various pieces. There's that's the O-ring around the nose. I've probably got another one of those. The larger O-rings are hard and one of them's broken. Not sure what I'll do there. I don't have another one that I can easily replace there. That's the only one. The spare starter motor brushes were completely worn out on, well, one brush was cocked sideways, and so I haven't bothered doing any sort of cleanup on that kit. It's done more work than the 94 one, so I'll put the 94 one back together. I'm sure it was running before I started, but it's just going to look a whole lot nicer. I thought I might have been able to test this starter motor with this little power supply, but it's only 3 amps and doesn't look at it. So I grabbed this battery out of my 1990 and just using the leads off the power supply, I've try and do it one-handed again. I thought this starter motor was a load of rubbish, so I just threw it back together roughly to keep the parts together, and I thought, well, I'll give it a buzz. The brushes are shit in it and everything, but it would double as a spare, I suppose, so I'll throw that in the spares box. This is typical of the boxes of shit I got with this Chook shed find, and I've sorted through it already to pick all the top end cylinder parts out of that. A lot of things have been cut off the bike with snips or angle grinder, all thrown into boxes. There's parts here from different bikes, different oil filter and things. That's a different carburetor and bits and pieces. As I said, most of the pieces have been taken out of here. There's bloody rockers for a twin valve bike of some description. Now, these two boxes are two of about 6 that I went hunting through looking for timing chain guides, and I didn't ultimately find them. I've turned everything upside down. 2 strips of plastic that just didn't seem to come with the kit, and so I ordered new ones from Suzuki yesterday. It's going to cost me about $100 for the 2 strips of plastic by the time they get here. Hopefully they're the only parts I need. These are some of the sorted parts that have come out of some of the Chook shit. They're cam chain tensioners. So I've got 2 cylinder heads and cam covers. That's the other one down there. I think this is the one off the 94. While I'm at it, there's another box. I think that's a Mikuni carby and bits and pieces in that one. The pile's obviously diminishing because I've cleaned up a whole lot of bits. I've got this engine sat up right in front of my nose like a bloody gynecologist. It's the new piston, 0.5 millimeter oversize. That's the new old reboard cylinder. Bought over 0.5 millimeter oversized to match the piston, nicely honed. Got a couple of chips out of the fins there where some clown has probably used the wrong spanner on undoing these bolts at some point, but that shouldn't affect it too much. The cylinder head place gave it a bit of a shot of paint, painted over all the shit largely, but anyway, there's the new base gasket, rings, gudgeon pin and new clips. I've got to make a piece of, I've got to remove this stuff and make a piece of wood that goes in and supports the base of the piston. I need to set the rings up on the piston, then put the piston onto the new gudgeon pin, gasket on, have these surfaces clean. I'm just looking at dowel pins. This dowel pin's a bit rusty. I'll give that a little bit of an emery cloth, make sure this surface is perfect, and then I should be able to slide the barrel down over the piston. I was having difficulty identifying the top and second ring, so I had them under the microscope trying to look at their profile. The 50 there means it's 0.5 millimeters oversize, and in the end they're different thicknesses, so they only go one way. Well, that's it on. Not something I could film because I needed 3 hands rather than one holding a camera. Got the gasket in there, got the rings spaced at 120 degrees as best I could, cam chain thread through. I'm going to Next, put on these little 6mm nuts just to hold that head down, so I can then give the crank a few turns just to see that it's all operating smoothly. Got a pair of pliers hanging on that chain to keep a bit of tension on it. I'm going to roll the motor just forward slowly to see the chains rolling through the pliers and the pistons going up and down, and it all seems nice and smooth. That's what I want, and I think it's time to look at the cylinder head. I've cleaned this cylinder head as much as I'm going to at this point. The inlet valve on this looked new compared to the exhaust valve. The exhaust valve had a fair bit of carbon on it. I'm struggling to get any more off there. Inlet valve looked good, and I've cleaned that surface up. The main problem I found with it, this bearing surface on this end of the camshaft is a bit rough. It's worse than this one, although there's a few scratches on there as well. So the metal that's gone through the crankcase has found its way up and messed up those surfaces. The matching surfaces on the cam cover are here and here. That one doesn't feel too bad, but you can see close up that one's a bit messed up. The cam itself runs that way in the bike, so that end there is in that worst affected area, and that seems quite smooth with the tip of the screwdriver across there. And that's the other journal there, also quite smooth, so I don't think the cam itself is worn. The rest of the lobes and things on that seem fine. I haven't cleaned up this cam cover at all yet. I had to make a decision as to whether I was going to release these valves and change the valve stem oil seals which come in the gasket kit that I've got. And I can't find my collet releasing tool. I can't put my hands on it easily in the shed, so I decided not to. Given I've got a problem here anyway, I want to just see how the bike goes. I'm pretty sure it's not going to stop the bike running. Cylinder head can be removed in the frame, and I've got another whole cylinder head that I could potentially swap in if I had to. I'm going to run with these parts, see how it goes. This is the cylinder head off the spare motor, and it's the barrel that was under this cylinder head that I'm using now. Now, I think water has laid in the cylinder, and the original piston and bore was damaged by a bit of rust from water in the cylinder. As to whether this cylinder head, if those valves were removed and cleaned up, has other problems, it may not have the camshaft problem, bearing problem that the other one has. But I'm not going to dismantle this. I'm going to try the other one. One thing I do notice is that these valve adjustment covers are in better nick on this one. I'll swap those over. One of them's pretty butchered on the 90 on the head that I'm using. Yeah, that's why I haven't investigated this too much, but I can keep it in reserve if need be. Who knows whether once those valves are out what that would look like. Those valves themselves may even clean up. So that's the cylinder and the cylinder head sitting on the engine. There's no reason for the cylinder bit to be removed again, but the cylinder head has to come off because the valve chain guides that I'm missing fit down the hole here and just slot in underneath the cylinder head. So I can't assemble anything more with the cylinder head until they arrive. Suzuki McCone in Melbourne got my order and processed my credit card yesterday on that purchase. They were in stock, so it'd be interesting if they're actually in the post yesterday as well. But who knows when they'll arrive. In the meantime, I've got parts of the cylinder head, the cam cover, that I can clean up. Various other bits and pieces. The chain tensioner can be cleaned up. Pipe for the carburetor, inlet pipe. I think I'm going to set this whole jig up with the exhaust and carburetor and airbox and then take the wiring loom off the frame and actually make this engine run in this setup. So that's something I'm looking forward to. Just got notified that the chain guides are coming in the post tomorrow, so get out to your shed and have some fun.